Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. Floyd Shivambu has had a very adventurous time in South African politics since August of 2024. He quit the Economic Freedom Fighters to join Umkhonto weSizwe. He was appointed as the national organizer for Umkhonto weSizwe. In November, he was appointed as the Secretary General for Umkhonto weSizwe Party. At this point, it was looking as if it's going to go up and up and up, and he could be the future president of the Umkhonto weSizwe Party and, somebody who will take Umkhonto weSizwe Party to another level and to success in the next election. And if anything were to ever happen to Jacob Zuma, there would be a clear succession plan. But in June of 2025, he was removed unceremoniously as the Secretary General of the MK Party. And he contributed to that. He scored some own goals. He was fighting with Tutu Zuma, trying to discipline her, trying to show her power, at the same time going to visit his so-called prophet Bushiri, and the prophet didn't tell him that the prophet is not prophesying in a prophetic direction that's going to help him get to the top of the MK totem pole. Bushiri, oh my Bushiris. Bushiri. Let me move on. I don't want to talk about Bushiri, but I don't think that man is a real prophet, pastor, and or anything, healer, whatever he calls himself. I think he's more genuinely the fugitive from the law that he is, and probably has committed the things that people say he has done, fraud and all of those other things. So Floyd Shivambu goes to visit Bushiri. They use that as the pretext to remove him from Secretary General of the party. And now, here we are, 19 June 2025. He's launching a new political party. In a period of 308 days, Floyd Shivambu has been a leader, a member, a participator in 3 political parties. 3! That's a lot. That's a lot of political parties to be part of in 308 days. As the poet William Wordsworth said in 1785, South Africa is a movie. We live in a drama, a series. Every day you'll be shocked by something new. We've even forgotten what shocked us 2 weeks ago. Next week there'll be something new. I don't know how William Wordsworth knew this, but clearly this is what's happening. You can forget which political t-shirt somebody was wearing 2 weeks ago because things are moving so fast. So here's what Floyd Shivambu had to say at the press conference.
My view about the formation of a political party is that a political party must never be founded by an individual. But that if we were to form a political party, let us go to the people of South Africa and ask them if they want to have a political party. We can't form a political party as a group of friends and as few individuals. So a political party should never be an individual project where you feel like, no, I want to start a political party and then you start it. It must never be a family project. It's very dangerous to have political parties which are family run. A political party must not be a tribal or ethnic project. In South Africa today, a political party must not be a regional, must not even be a provincial party. A political party must not be a platform for self-enrichment. It must not be a fiefdom. So we're here today to announce that we're going to be convening the process of consulting the people of South Africa on the formation of a political movement that will be through representative of the people of South Africa.
Politics is hard. South African politics is hard and it's complicated, and it's going to get more difficult for the political players. The political context in South Africa is very fluid right now. And this new party led by Floyd Shivambu is going to take the chakalaka to another level of chakalaka. There's so much happening, so many moving pieces, and we really don't know where things are going to land, on what the shape of the political environment is going to be by the time we get to 2029. There are some factors that are in Floyd Shivambu's favor, and there are some factors which could limit his journey and his success. So let's have a conversation about 3 questions. 3 questions in this episode. Number 1, what does it take to get a seat in parliament? Number 2, what does it take to succeed in national level politics? And number 3, what impacts will this particular decision have on the MK party and other parties within the South African mix? And as I've said, the political context in South Africa is very fluid, but we have to consider the context even at a higher level, right? So before we dive into this discussion, look at those questions and think about the permutations and combinations. I want to ask you how you've been viewing this Floyd Shivambu situation, and particularly his decision making. One day he says the EFF is the best vehicle, revolutionary vehicle that he built. He chose the colors. He wrote the songs. He's the one who wrote the cardinal pillars. He gave Julius Malema his name. He's the one who taught Mbuyiseni Ndlozi how to sing a song, how to hold a note. He's the one who taught Sinao Tambo how to walk when he was 3. He makes all of these claims, right? About I was so instrumental in building the vehicle, right? Chose the colors, everything. Then next day, he's saying MK is the best and most sound decision of them all. And have you ever noticed Floyd Shivambu never really talks much about himself as I am? He's like, we made it's just you, bruh. You are one man. Who is this we? Why are we plural every time? Anyway, jokes aside, he then says, MK is the best and most sound decision. Then he says visiting Bushiri was a sound decision and a robust decision. And then now it's another political formation, another political platform. What do you think about this particular set of decisions and his decision making? Does it say anything to you about his leadership acumen, his decision making faculties, and whether or not he's somebody who can be custodian of a major political party of the future and or build a major political party of the future? Is this just a case of poor leadership, betrayal, confusion, bad luck? Where do you stand? What's your assessment? We have a very vibrant comment section on the dissection, and I'd love to see what you think, and I'm sure other people are already there commenting and having a discussion. So what do you make of this? Tell us, share your comments. Let's have a conversation there. So let's think about the broader context before we think about where this new party fits in. South Africa is entering the period of post-liberation movement politics. South Africa under the ANC has been what is known in political science as a dominant party state. One party at the helm of the executive running things, like ZANU-PF, like Frelimo, many other parties like that. And that has been prolonged to an extent by the GNU, which is the beginning of the end, right? Because now they're at 40%. They need these other entities, the DA and all of these other players to hold on to the control. But still, the country is being run by the ANC. So as that is happening, there's a shift, right? There's a shift. Post-liberation movement politics. We've seen it happening in Kenya. We've seen it happen in Botswana. As the ANC goes into the local government election and as they go into the elective conference, the dynamics are such that the ANC may come out weaker in local government. The ANC may come out weaker after their conference, right? Ramaphosa is not going to be the party leader post-2027. Patrice Motsepe may come in. But still, that may only slow down the pace of decline, but it does look as if the decline is not necessarily going to reverse anytime soon because the economy is not doing well, corruption is relatively high, people are not seeing changes in their lives, there are potholes, traffic lights, floods, people are dying, MECs and premiers are acting confused when they should be acting, in ways that save lives. All of these things sour people's perception of a party. And the liberation credentials are no longer going to be what can, stymie those particular effects. I mean, if you look at what happened in Botswana, right? Last year, we saw the Botswana Democratic Party, BDP, suffer a heavy defeat after almost 6 decades in power. 6 decades over. We've seen new leadership now in Botswana. We've seen the loss of mass support for Frelimo in Mozambique, loss of support for ZANU-PF in Zimbabwe. In fact, both Frelimo and ZANU-PF have been accused of not holding free and fair elections. But the South African environment is very different, right? So even though Fikile Mbalula sometimes romanticizes things such as ZANU-PF and Frelimo, the political entities, South Africa has robust court systems. You have an independent election commission. You have a robust media environment. You have access to internet. It's not going to be a case like what we're seeing in Tanzania where they are just banning Twitter, blocking a variety of things. And I know there are people who feel that there were issues, with the last election, but I think it was a free and fair election. and MK people, when they make that argument, they don't have me supportive of that particular set of arguments, although I too am concerned about the shutdown of the display of the results at the results center. That was quite an alarming set of events, but I don't think that there was any funny business overall. Point being, I don't think that there's going to be any way that the decline of the ANC can be stopped through funny business such as election rigging. I think the change in environment is happening and everyone can appreciate where this is going. I think the decline that I'm talking about is making some people nervous, though, particularly big business, the oligarchs, Johan Rupert, Nikki Oppenheimer, the other Oppenheimer family members, people who are in big business. They are worried because they are like, what will the next set of leaders look like? What policy preferences will they prefer? And we saw a similar thing in the 80s. There was a lot of concern coming from Anglo Gold, Anglo Val, coming from Rembrandt about what the future of South Africa will look like. People were doing initiatives, the Menels, the Ruperts. They did the Urban Foundation, where they were grooming leaders such as Cyril Ramaphosa. We had other entities. You know, there was an institution called CBM, which was engaging with the leaders of the ANC as they were in Lusaka, trying to convince them not to nationalize, trying to convince them not to pursue the Freedom Charter. And they prevailed in any case in a lot of those things, right? Because the people that they were speaking to, Tito Mboweni, Trevor Manuel, Thabo Mbeki, and Jill Marcus, a few others, Leseho Lehanyana, these were the people that were being engaged. And as you can see, the direction of the economy and the policy preferences of the ANC were such that big business and the oligarchs were able to prevail. Michael Spicer, Gavin Reilly, several other people were involved in that. So we're at a period which is similar to what we saw in the 80s now, where people are saying, okay, what is a multi-party coalition government in South Africa post-ANC? What does that look like? And this is why we have an interesting development in Floyd starting this political party, because the scenario is that everyone is trying to see how they can mitigate the rise of MK or EFF or whatever. The scenario that farmer owners, entities like AfriForum, Johan Rupert, Nikki Oppenheimer, and others are afraid of is the Zimbabwe scenario. They don't want a Mugabe type of figure. They don't want nationalization to be implemented. They don't want populist policies. They don't want necessarily far left populist policies because they don't want Zimbabwe. And they're willing to invest in political players and political parties that may be able to mitigate that. Right? That's the scenario. That's the context in which Floyd is launching the party. So let's now think about question number one. What does it actually take to get a seat in parliament? And what are Floyd's prospects coming in with a new party? Right? There are 27.6 million registered voters in South Africa as of today. They were, and I think are still going to be, 23,292 voting districts. In the last election, we had 16.2 million people voting, and the turnout was 58.64%, which was down from 66%, right? And if you look at how the different political parties performed in that election, let's just look at that now. You had the ANC coming in first with 6.45 million votes, getting them 40.2%, 159 seats. The Democratic Alliance getting 3.5 million votes, 21.81%, 87 seats. MK coming in at 2.3 and getting 14.5 and 58 seats. Then you've got the EFF, 1.5 million, 9.52, 39 seats. IFP, 618,000, that gets them 3.8%. If we stop there, you can see that to get into the top five, you're going to need to get more votes than the IFP, right? Assuming everything remains the same. Then the question is, where do you get those votes, right? Are you going to get them in KwaZulu-Natal? Are you going to get them in Mpumalanga? Where are you going to get those votes? Right? Floyd, I think, is from Limpopo province, is a Gauteng guy as well. So Gauteng is very difficult to get votes in. Everybody is competing in Gauteng. To become a leading player to the point where you can get 700,000 votes, Gauteng, very difficult. Patriotic Alliance struggled to get 100,000 votes in Gauteng. If you look at the dynamics, it's difficult there. They're not going to get them in KZN, right? MK is strong in KZN. Then you look at the IFP strong in KZN. Then the question then becomes, will Floyd be able to get those votes in the Western Cape? I don't think so. Limpopo province, the ANC is very dominant there. The EFF, even with the leadership of Julius Malema, has been struggling to break through. But let's assume that he can get some votes in Limpopo, his province, and maybe some people just give him a chance from the breakaways within the EFF and the MK. Does that give you 600,000 votes? Look, Patriotic Alliance, number 6, 330,000. Freedom Front Plus, 219,000. This is very difficult to do, right? Then let's look at the next 14. You look at Action SA, 192,000. And then you look at the parties which got 2 seats and were, in the 60s. Rise Mzansi, 67,970. Build One South Africa, 65,919. You look at African Transformation there, coming in 63,554. Two seats. Then you can see that the lowest party, CCC, they're coming in 37,000, close to 40,000. So effectively, you need 40,000 votes to get in. But getting those 40,000 votes is not easy. It's not easy. And now we can think about the second level of the question. What do you need to be a successful politician in South Africa? And we can then ask ourselves if Floyd has got all of those elements. So firstly, you need skills. You can't do it without skills, right? Public speaking skills, political philosophy, theory. You need that. You need charisma. You need management experience. You need all of those things. So I think we can say that Floyd has the skills. I think we can say he's got some of those skills, right? Then you need brand name. You need name recognition, nationwide name recognition. You need political credibility, right? It will be difficult for Siya Kolisi or Cassper Nyovest, for instance, to form a political party, even though they are widely recognized names, simply because they're not known for politics, right? But if you think about somebody like Bobby Wine, it's different, right? So it's not just about name and name recognition. Cassper Nyovest, very difficult for that man to form a political party because his music is not political. But Bobby Wine in Uganda was successful, but that involved his coverage of politics in his music. He was always talking about the conditions of the youth in his music. And then he had confrontations with the government, right? Early in his career, he used to address the issues of social justice, political reform, youth empowerment, and his lyrics often highlighted the struggles of ordinary Ugandans, right? And that earned him the nickname Ghetto President. So there was already a feeling that, this guy is speaking to me, speaking about my issues. Then he transitioned into politics. He saw some injustice that happened in his own life. And I think at some nightclub, he was assaulted by the security guards, the local security. And that then put him on basically a political path. And then he ran for a parliamentary seat in 2017. And from there, he was then leveraging his popularity, his activist reputation, his music, name recognition, young voters, the urban poor. They rallied around him, and that's how he became one of the leading voices in Ugandan politics and African politics. So you do need name recognition. You do need all of that, right? Then you also need the money. You need the you need the zak. You need that thing, right? So money in politics is very necessary because the modern society that we live in, you have to be able to campaign across the board, and the game is very expensive. You need to have funding to pay for an office, a website, a team of professionals, merchandise, a t-shirt in bulk. If you're buying 100,000 t-shirts in bulk, you're probably paying 90 rands per t-shirt. That's with the printing and all of that. And you just to get 100,000 t-shirts, you'd need 9 million rands, right? Then we're talking about posters, banners. These are expensive. You need to make sure you have nationwide coverage. Look at how Rise Mzansi spent a lot of money on the posters, and it still didn't get them as many votes as they would have liked, right? Then you would need to be able to pay influencers, right? The micro influencers on social media. If you are going radio, TV adverts, more expensive even than the micro influencers because they can get quite prohibitive, which is why DA was one of the few parties advertising on radio while other people just couldn't afford to go on radio in the same way. And doing all of that, you could still get 1% of the vote, right? You could still get 1% of the vote or less. So let me take you through some of these numbers and then you're going to see what I'm talking about. I'm just going to look at the funding that political parties received in 2024 and also in 2023 and give you an idea how much the elections cost. So if you look at Inkatha Freedom Party, in February, they get 10 million from Nikki Oppenheimer. They get 10 million from Jonathan Oppenheimer. Then in April, they get 15 million from Jonathan Oppenheimer. In April, again, they get 15 million from Nikki Oppenheimer. Then from Patrice Mutsipa's businesses, they get 840,000. Martin Moshal of Betway, they get 7.5 million. And in total, in that election period, they get 58.34 million, right? In return for that, they were able to get 618,208 votes, right? Just 618,000 votes. Percentage of votes that they got, 3.85%. Voter acquisition cost per vote, 94.4 Rand per vote. You look at Rise Mzansi in 2024, they were able to get 31,884 rands, right? Then they get in the first quarter, which is in the May period, 33 million. So that's 65 million that they raised in the 2024 election cycle. And that translated to 69,970 votes, which is 0.42%. So the voter acquisition cost for them is 967 rands per vote. You look at the Democratic Alliance, they get in that election period 183,238, right? 183,238,462. That's the total amount of money they get. They get 3.5 million votes. Their percentage of votes, 21.81. Their voter acquisition cost is 52 Rand per vote. So the older the party is, the longer it has been in existence, the easier it is for that political party to be able to acquire votes, and the cheaper it is for that political party to be able to acquire votes. Then the question then becomes, will Floyd Shivambu be able then to acquire votes more cheaply than Rise Mzansi, than IFP, or will he be more expensive? Will it cost him maybe 1,000 rands per vote? If you look at the funding and then convert that into, the vote share that he's necessarily going to get, then the question then becomes, where's he going to get that money? Where's he going to get that money? Because we've discussed now that you need skills and name recognition, but you need money. Who's going to give him that money, right? Then that leads to an interesting theory, right? Let me tell you why he could have access to the money and where he could get that money, right? This book by Peter Du Toit, in chapter 3, Rupert actually says that he has a relationship with Floyd Shivambu. He says Floyd Shivambu is the man who told him to go to Power FM and to explain his thoughts and said, people need to see this side of you. Which side were you seeing, Floyd? So Floyd Shivambu and Johan Rupert have a relationship. And he then says Floyd Shivambu is the reason why he went to do the Given Curry interview on Power FM. Power FM, where Mbuyiseni Ndlozi went when he left the EFF. So you connect those dots, as Shakespeare once said, right? And you heard what Rupert said about EFF and Julius Malema when he was at the White House, right? That I'm their number one enemy, etc., etc. So for Rupert, the destruction and the fall of EFF is something that he potentially could invest money in. As a donor, he does have motive to fund this new political party, right? He has a motive as part of dividing the left vote, slowing down the MK party and the EFF, because he's also expressed his resentment and animus to the Guptas, state capture. In fact, he used to have Bell Pottinger as his public relations company. Then Bell Pottinger went and got the Guptas as a client, and then Rupert ditched them. And then we started hearing about state capture and radical economic transformation and how, Bell Pottinger was doing all of these evil things, but Rupert was using them for 18 years. So I don't know what they were doing for him. But the point I'm trying to make here is that Rupert has a prior animus towards MK and its leadership, and also to the EFF and its leadership. And he has been loudly expressing that. He said it in books. He said it in the White House. So he has a relationship with Floyd Shivambu. So Floyd may actually be able to get money. The challenge with that funding source, right, is that Floyd Shivambu himself has framed himself as Marxist-Leninist in thinking, theoretical framework, whatever he carries, Das Kapital everywhere he's going. So would a billionaire oligarch who owns large parts of the South African economy fund a politician who conveniently is opposed to his enemies as a result of having fallen out with his enemies, but whose politics is fundamentally and ideologically against his existence as a capitalist and an oligarch in South Africa. That's the interesting part. But he may very well be willing to do that because an enemy of an enemy is my friend in politics. There are no permanent friends. There are only permanent interests. And for the short to medium term, they may view preventing the MK party as being worthwhile. Remember all of the doomsday coalition narratives. And if you look at the way the Oppenheimers poured money into the IFP in May and April, it was very clear that they had seen the polling that MK was going to win KwaZulu-Natal and potentially even get a bigger share of the vote. They were like, we need to give these guys as much money as we can. And that's what I think helped the IFP to get the 600,000 votes that they got. But if you think about that, if they hadn't gotten all of that money from the Oppenheimers in those large chunks, it would have been a totally different situation, right? It would have been a totally different situation. So that's something that could be helpful to him. He may be able to get money. And if he can get money, then he'll be able to get a team. He'll be able to do some of the things that are necessary to do because people won't just come if there's no income that they can get in your political formation, right? Especially going into local government elections. They're very expensive. You need funds, right? So that's number one. That's number one around the money. But then if you have the talent, if you have the money, you still need differentiation and a competitive advantage. Right? You can have skills, you can have brand, you can have money. But what is your differentiation and competitive advantage? What makes you stand out from the EFF versus the MK party versus ANC? Because Floyd is largely going to be running this whole Marxist-Leninist thing, right? But there's already a lot of parties that are already saying that they have versions of this type of thing. So what about your Marxist-Leninist Fanonian framework is different from everyone else's Marxist, Leninist, Fanonian framework, except for the fact that it's you? What makes you have the competitive advantage over these particular teams? Because strategy is about how do you differentiate and have the competitive advantage in your plan of action, right? What about you necessarily will take you over the edge versus these political rivals? This is why politics in South Africa can be very difficult. So many political parties, very few people can be able to differentiate and get a competitive advantage as things stand. Think about the playing field. You got Gayton Mackenzie saying, Abahambe. You've got fighters wanting to fight. You've got Congolosing over there. You've got DA trying to prevent the Doomsday Alliance. You've got all of these entities already operating. Rise, Build One South Africa, ATM, all of these entities. Where are you going to fit in and what's going to make you different? I think that's going to be a very difficult challenge for them. Then you need a team, right? And if you have money, it becomes a little bit easier to build a team, but you still need to bring together a compelling group of people to show that you're not alone, that you have some mojo, some momentum, some aura to actually be able to go to the distance. Does Floyd have that at this point? Time will tell. Time will tell. So there's something else that I think is very important to bring up, and that is the risk factor for Floyd himself. We haven't heard about VBS in a while, but will that remain the case? You know, sometimes when the volume goes to mute on various topics, I wonder what's going on, because sometimes it does look to me like cases are being used for political purposes. Or when you're a threat to Zuma or Malema, your cases can slow down, go away. Right? When you're close to powerful people in the ANC or when you're a minister, your case can go away. What happened to Thembisi Milane's implications with VBS? What happened to Khumbudzo Ntshavheni's allegations that she, as municipal manager, approved a tender that had not been put in the tender box? Right? That's what the judge said, and he referred the case to the NPA. We've never heard from that about that since then. And remember what Matodzi said. Remember why I'm bringing this up. The former chairperson of VBS Mutual Bank, Matodzi, he was handed a 495-year sentence for theft, fraud, money laundering, and racketeering, right? And this was for the collapse of VBS Bank. He was sentenced last year in 2024 in the Pretoria High Court. He pleaded guilty to 33 charges. He was jailed for 15 years on each count, and the counts run concurrently, which is why it's 495 years, but it's not really 495 years. But as part of a plea and sentence agreement, Matodzi admitted to being personally involved in the theft of billions of rands from 2017 to 2018 by creating fictitious credit in VBS accounts that was then transferred to other accounts. And his affidavit that he signed was leaked, and it mentioned the EFF, and it particularly mentioned Floyd Shivambu. That story has kind of like fallen away in the big discourse. But if Floyd starts growing and becomes a threat to the ANC, is it not a threat to his own political party that he still has this lingering over his head? According to the Matodzi affidavit, what he said at the meeting that he had with Floyd Shivambu, I explained the VBS position and the fact that the EFF's negative commentary about the VBS Zuma transaction was damaging the VBS reputation. Furthermore, I explained that as Black brothers, the EFF's constituencies were the VBS target market. I further informed them that VBS was willing to offer a donation to the EFF. I then proposed that VBS can donate 5 million rands immediately once a bank account has been opened at VBS and 1 million per month to the EFF. I made it clear that the amount could only be deposited into a VBS account and that the EFF should therefore open an account with VBS. After I left this meeting, Floyd and I remained in contact. At some stage, Floyd indicated that they have opened an account at VBS in the name of a company called Scamera. A transfer of 5 million was, as promised, was made on my instructions from Malibongwe to Scamera on 8 June 2017. Subsequent payments were made to Scamera VBS account every month and were paid from Vele or any of Vele's subsidiaries. So Brian Shivambu was involved, Floyd Shivambu was involved. They were mentioned directly and explicitly, and they were the ones. What Matodzi says, after VBS was placed under curatorship, I met Floyd and his younger brother Brian several times at Floyd's residence in Bryanston. This was the first time I met Brian. At one of the meetings, myself, Floyd, and Brian agreed to regularize the 5 million plus 1 million monthly donations. It was agreed amongst us that we draft a contract between Vele and Scamera for consulting work in petroleum and storage facilities. The said contract, which was backdated by agreement, was drafted by the Shivambu brothers. The signatories to that contract were myself, representing Vele, and Brian, who was representing Scamera. So that's a risk factor that has to be considered going into this particular thing. Floyd has experience in student politics, in ANC Youth League politics, in the EFF as deputy president, as a member of parliament. His name recognition is extremely high. He has a history that is, I think, competitive, but the trust factor is low. And some of the intangibles, the people factors, are low. People are saying that he's arrogant. People are saying that he doesn't know how to work with others. People are saying that he uses his intellectualism or his degrees as a bully pulpit, and they don't care anymore about his education background. You need to be able to navigate the ground. And I don't know if he's been on the ground in the same way that both Julius are, that other politicians are, because Zuma is a man of the people. Put Zuma on the ground. He'll show you. He can move a crowd. Can move them. Julius can move a crowd, right? Now, where's Floyd going to be able to fit in there? Where's Floyd going to be able to fit in? If he's going against Mutsipe, he's going against these big guys. Is he then just going to be making a play to get 2 or 3 seats and then sit in a coalition and potentially get a ministerial position? Is that the vehicle? Is that what this was all about? It's been a hectic 308 days for Floyd Shivambu. And I think there are some lessons to learn here, just at an individual level, that sometimes loyalty is more important than opportunistic advancement. That sometimes being a collaborator is more important than being the leader. You want to be in charge. You want to be number one. Number one sometimes is overrated. You can be stable at number 2. And you can grow and have celebration as number 2. You don't always have to be number 1. And then we have to ask ourselves, did ego cause this chaos? And then at a higher level, ask ourselves, as the SADC region enters into this post-liberation political moment, what is actually the future of politics that young Africans want to see? What is the necessary future of South African politics? Are characters like Floyd Shivambu part of the future, or are they actually now in the way of a future politics? Because a lot of this is still around personalities. A lot of this is not being driven now by ideas and a contest of ideas, because one week this is the vehicle, the next week this is the vehicle, the next week now it's a bus, now it's a motorcycle, now it's a tuk-tuk, now it's a Uber, now it's a Bolt, now it's a bicycle, now we're at the Formula One. How is this helpful to dealing with the China threat? Because our deindustrialization, under-industrialization is also being facilitated by taking all of these imports from China. How is it dealing with the geopolitical challenges? How is it all of these things are questions that must be asked. As things shift and change, what is the right politics that young Africa, young South Africa should be chasing? I don't know. Let's have a conversation. I'll meet you in the comments. What do you make of everything that's going on? Let's meet in the comments.